Just take a few deep, slow breaths to get your mind centered in the body. Okay, friends, so we're on our first full day of the retreat. We've already had a few meditation sessions and trying to begin or develop our practice of mindfulness, learning how to get more centered and grounded in the present moment, trying to overcome the hindrances for gaining concentration, even to be mindful. So I wanted to talk, about, what's the purpose of all this? Well, as most of you probably know, the teachings of the Buddha are outlined in the Four Noble Truths. I think you all know them, but just to review, that means the truth that suffering exists and that all beings in all different forms experience various types of suffering. They experience suffering of these bodies that get broken bones and get diseases and other problems. And then they suffer mentally with the worry and the pain and the fear of getting sicknesses, or old age and death, or fear of getting in accidents and becoming a cripple, or some other horrible forms that happen to people, thousands of people every day around the world. So the suffering of the physical body in the physical world, because of everything changes and basically pretty much beyond our control. Even the process of aging and death, everybody kind of fears death or fears getting old because, who's going to take care of me? What's going to happen? Amounts of money that have to be spent in caring for these bodies that are subjected to all kind of, care and problems. So this is all part of, the mental suffering. And it's based on also the fear of the future, because the future is unsure. And then there's another level of suffering which is more mental, and that is not getting what you want and getting what you don't want. And this also is, again, connected with the past and the future. So we all have wants and desires, want things to happen, want to do things, expecting things, but they don't always come. And so we get disappointed, we feel sad, or we have to start wanting something else. And then there's the fear of getting what you don't want. Having visitations from people that you don't like. Unexpectedly, somebody calls you up, saying, "Oh, I'm coming to visit. I'm going to stay with you for a week." What? Oh no! And so many other things. Not getting the kind of weather you want, not getting the kind of neighbors that you want, the kind of a job you want. So the mind is constantly being pushed and pulled in so many directions by that, and pretty much most people don't really know, how to deal with it too much, except for allowing their mind to build up tons of stress, worry, anxiety, fear, anger, about all these issues going in within ourselves as well as with your friends or the larger world, And it creates a lot of, mental disturbance. And these mental disturbances, emotions and so on, also cause problems for our body too, affect our body, as most of you well know. And then there's another level of suffering, of the suffering of impermanence, that just the fact that everything is constantly changing and that we cannot really control things, because things go on according to the law of karma, the law of conditioning. And so, that also is causes a lot of anguish. Things change, our bodies and minds change. So anyway, this is what the Buddha was the most interested in trying to understand this nature of suffering. But essentially, in the Buddha's teaching, suffering is the root of suffering is in the mind. And even though the world is changing beyond our control, still it's the way you react to it. A person can accept it, perfectly accept it, and not let the changes of the world affect them. Or another person could just get bugged and irritated and gripe and complain about everything that they're seeing and hearing around them, and allowing their mind to get sucked into this kind of web of suffering. And so that's really what the Buddha was focused on in his, in his experience of, enlightenment, or especially in understanding the mind. That the root cause of suffering is within the mind, and it's continued and perpetuated by our actions. By not understanding the nature of the mind, not understanding how the mind ticks, how it works. So when something happens to the mind, we don't know how to fix it. So, the Buddha was really like a scientist, mind scientist. And in his experience of really understanding how the mind works, and especially in terms of how it causes itself suffering, or how it creates the conditions to experience happiness. And it comes through really the way that we think, the way that we speak, and the way that we act and use the body. So this is summed up very clearly in the first two verses of the Dhammapada, which go like, all actions are led by the mind. Mind is their master. Mind is their maker. If one acts or speaks with an impure mind, then suffering will follow, as the cartwheel follows the foot of the ox. Now, for you people born in this country, you can imagine the pictures of the ox carts in India or in Asia, where two oxen are pulling a big heavy load of hay or something on a big huge wheels, and the wheel is this far from its hoof, and sweating and toiling to pull this load. Well, that's the same way with our accumulated karmic actions are like that heavy load that keep following us around. And in the same way, if one acts or speaks with the pure mind, or at least a more purified mind, then happiness will follow, as your shadow follows you around. So basically what this is focusing on or explaining is the law of karma. How many of you have heard of the law of karma? I'm sure everybody has, right? Now it's a popular word that movie stars and TV news announcers are using, karma, karma, karma. So basically, the law of karma is a natural law. And it's like the law of gravity. So if you throw something up, what happens? It comes down. And sometimes with a big thud, right? So in the same way, if we throw something out of our mouth, that means some speech, it goes out into the world, it goes through your bodies and minds, even with these words that I'm talking right now, and causing some kind of reaction. Maybe Hunter was crazy, or whatever. But anyway, it causes a reaction in your mind that then could trigger off some bodily action or speech. And if you throw something out of your body, like, stick your tongue out at somebody or flip somebody the finger, I won't do that, but, you might get a reaction. Goes out through people's bodies and minds, goes out into the universe and comes back like a boomerang, boomerang, and it comes back to you. So it is similar to the law of karma. Actions through speech and actions through our body. And also your thoughts. So even your thoughts are like radio waves or television waves, but this is, radio waves, they go out. And other people, our minds are actually very similar to receivers and transmitters. So we receive a lot of input, like sounds and visible things. They go inside our nervous system and mind and trigger off reactions. You would go, ugh, or, some kind of reactions. So in the same way, even your thoughts, if you're thinking angry or hateful thoughts to someone, or maybe they're the opposite, kind of lustful, desirous thoughts, or just so many types of thoughts. But anger is one of the very common ones that causes reactions in people. Even though that person might not know it, they're sitting 10 feet from you and you might be thinking some bad thoughts for some reason. That person may not actually hear or know you're doing it, but it still can cause reactions in them, and then cause them to have some kind of unconscious reaction, back toward you. Or if a person has, their mind is always full of, loving kindness and and gentle and kind thoughts, then people can be naturally attracted to these kind of people because it is creating a kind of a pleasant, a non-fear type of vibration. So all these things, are part of the law of karma, but the main point is it's coming from our mind. And there's another very important stanza of the Buddha that he said that the world, the arising of the world, the ceasing of the world, and the path leading to the ceasing of the world is right within this 5 or 6 foot long body with its nervous system, memory, and consciousness. And so what that means basically is that our mind is creating the way that we perceive the world based on our conditioning. That's a little bit maybe harder to understand, but through the practice of mindfulness and developing your meditation, you'll start to understand the deeper meanings of these things. And so, why is it so difficult to control the mind? I mean, how many people today, you're trying to remember or even count your breaths from 1 to 10, but you got interrupted because your mind got lost in some thoughts? That happened to anybody? Only 1, 2? So, didn't you want to just sit and count your breaths? And why did you get lost in your thoughts? Is it your mind? If something is yours, it implies that you should have control over it. Even that's the Buddha's own definition of not self. If something is self, we should have control over it. But we don't have control over our body because when the conditions are right, it's going to get sick, no matter how much you're saying, I don't want to get sick, or I don't want to grow old, or I don't want to die. It's going to happen. So that's one of the way the Buddha defined that this body is not ourself. Because if it was, you should be able to say, body, be like this. Don't be like that. Or mind, be like this. Mind, don't be like that. And all this is to illustrate simply that these body and minds are, have been conditioned over even many, many lifetimes of accumulating karmic conditions, which are carried over through genes and things like that, that are going to determine to a large extent what happens in your life. Like what you're going to turn up to being. I had no idea I was going to be a monk until I was 25, 26-year-old. Now I've been a monk 50 years. Where'd all that come from? Nobody else in my family, did that. And everybody's totally unique in terms of even within one family, even identical twins. Even though they're identical in maybe lots of ways, still when it comes to the consciousness, and they're different. So this is the deep mystery about life. But anyway, we'll be talking more about that. But I want to go back to, kind of try to explain the fundamental nature of our consciousness and how our consciousness has been caught and sort of trapped in this web of constantly going between past and future and has lost that connection to the present moment. So, I'm going to take a little, go, let's take a little story. Well, I'd like to hear a little story about the mind. Okay. So at the time of conception, your mother and father produce the material elements like, these chromosomes and those things, right? And produce a new one-celled being, the start of a new being. And at that time, the consciousness, which comes from another source, from a past life or some other source, is like the spark of electricity that then starts that process of cell division and the growth of a new body. It requires a consciousness. That's why if the consciousness doesn't come there, there'll be a miscarriage, there'll be a stillborn birth, and so on. Because it needs the consciousness to sort of activate. So anyway, in the space of 9 months, that new baby goes from a one-cell organism to a multi-billion cell. Now they're calling even trillion cells in one body, even a baby. Let's say billions, if you can't fathom a trillion. Billions are enough, right? So in the space of 9 months, it goes from an invisible one-cell organism to multi-billion cell organism, from no weight at all to 7 or 8 pounds, in the space of 9 months, with cell division, with each, and that consciousness that came there at the time of birth, with each cell division, that consciousness goes into each succeeding cell. So essentially, every cell in the body has a kind of consciousness and awareness. Even one-cell amoebas, swimming around in the water, they also have an awareness because they can, swim around and stuff. Anyway, and all those cellular consciousnesses are connected in what I call the inner internet, or the nervous system. The nervous system is the body's inner internet. And they're all connected. Because if something happens on your toe, impulses will be sent to the brain and trigger off all kind of other things going on. Or if you get a cut on your finger, then it sends signals all around and it starts sending white blood cells or whatever it is. It goes to clot that blood. And so there's an inner intelligence, within the body. Anyway, so in the space of 9 months, and all that was happening, that formation of this, wonderful human organism, which is thought to be the most advanced organism on Earth, right? At least so they say now, as of yet. We're still trying to find something on Mars, but anyway, this human intelligence, all of that process was happening in the present moment. And basically the body and mind were fused together because, the cell is the smallest unit of material matter, but yet it has its own consciousness. So basically they're fused together, they're not separate. And all of that was occurring in the present moment. And all of that occurred through natural intelligence. An IBM computer didn't make it. Or, some Einstein didn't make it. Or the doctors didn't make it. It came through natural intelligence. But what happens then at the time of birth? The baby comes out. What's the first thing usually the doctor does? Yeah. Cuts the cord. Now the baby gets set adrift gets separated from that life force from the mother. Now it becomes a separate little being, and everybody comes over and holds the baby. Gucci, gucci, goo. But this mind that's been in the womb for 9 months, in the present moment, when it comes out, it's still in that state, basically. But then, what's the next thing mother and father have to do? Give it a name, right? So now you give the baby a name. Little Johnny, little Susie. And all the relatives come over, hold the baby, call its name. But the baby doesn't react normally right away. When you call the name, it doesn't react. And its mind is still in a very oceanic, expanded, and what is called oceanic awareness. It's basically still in the present moment. And its mind is not focusing in on individual things and starting to think about them. And, I like this and I don't like that. Its mind is still very expansive, or hers. But then little by little, after the baby hears this word, his name, after some time, the people come and want to hold it. It starts to look. They call his name, and it starts to look. So now, little by little, it's starting to identify things. And what used to be expanded oceanic awareness, little by little, a little nucleus of a me or an I starts to coagulate and gets sort of focused behind the eyes. And now the things that are happening, this baby thinks, this somehow, all these things is pointing to this thing. This thing has a name, Johnny or Susie. And then it starts learning language and identifying things. The parents teach, that's Fido, and that's Kitty, and that's brother and sister, and mother and father. And so now it's starting to see things in terms of me in relationship to these objects. But that's created within the brain and the nervous system over usually, 6 months, a year, 2 years, continues. And then, the sweet grandmother comes and gives the baby its first chocolate. And then, it tastes the chocolate and big grin comes on the baby's face because it's a pleasurable feeling. Am I wrong? And then maybe the cat walks by and the baby reaches out and grabs the cat's tail and the cat scratches the baby and causes pain. Now the baby's starting to identify that object that we're calling a cat, or it could be anything else, that causes some discomfort, some pain. It starts to not want that again. And then after the grandmother keeps coming 5 or 6 times, every time he sees a certain face, he gets a pleasure. Excuse me if I'm always saying he, right, as conditioning, but now I have to say they or them, and I get confused, so please bear with me, okay? Then it starts to hope that face will come again because it's associating that face with a pleasurable feeling. And it's associating maybe the face of the uncle that held the baby too tight and gave it some pain with an unpleasurable feeling. Or maybe somebody who came and didn't give the baby anything, and they just have an indifferent sensation. But little by little, the mind starts to identify all these different objects as these objects that I want again, because they bring pleasure, like, the tender touch of the mother and the cuddling and all that, give a pleasurable feeling. And so this is the birth of the past and future. The past and the future aren't places outside of yourself, at least in the Dhamma terminology, in the Dhamma world. It's in the mind. And this is how it's created, at the time of the baby, and started identifying objects, that pleasurable objects bring craving for the future. That means you're expecting things to happen in the future. And having fear of getting things to come to you that you didn't like. Objects you think are painful will come into again in the future. And the mind, everything it comes into contact with through the rest of its life, the mind is doing that automatically. You don't really decide too much, but it's based on pleasurable feeling and painful feeling, and it's connected to the past and the future. And this is very important to understand, because this is the whole mind operates through this kind of phenomenon. But we don't know it's happening that way. No one tells us about this. And because the baby now starts focusing on objects, and when they reach where they call it the terrible twos or something like that, and the baby starts crawling around, and their brain is growing, so they want to, crawl over there and grab this and go over there and grab that. And then if those objects bring it pain and they don't like those objects, or other objects bring it pleasurable feeling, then they like those objects. And so the neurons, the brain has neurons in it, which are pathways, and they start to get formed in these circuits, hardwired kind of circuits. And it will start reacting the same way every time over and over again. And that, as you grow older, every object that you come into experience with, where it's food, it's sounds, it's things you smell, the mind starts dividing the whole world up into these things I like because they bring a pleasurable or some comfort feeling. These other things I don't like because they bring a painful feeling or some other negative problems. And, this continues to snowball the whole life. And we get drawn out of ourselves. We lose that connection to the body. And now the mind is focused on, I want this, I want that, I want that. Whole life we're told that, right? The kids are told, you have to go to school, you have to learn, you got to study this, you have to study that, and we're going to go here. And so, it's no fault of our own, it's just, that it occurs. But the thing is that, the mind buys the whole package. And the sense of self then starts to solidify, the sense of ego, the sense of all these things are happening to me. And no one has ever told us about it. And so by the time we might hear the Dhamma, it's almost too late. 20, 30 or more years of, the brain being totally hardwired into this, what we call the net of delusion, and the Buddha called the net of delusion. That means being separated from the present moment and having your whole life depend on the past and the future. And the fear and worry and anxiety that not getting what you want in the future or getting what you don't want in the future, that's what dominates 90% of most people's waking life. And just check it up next time. So when the mind is in the present moment, there isn't any fears and worries about the past or future. But because we become separate from that, and most people know nothing about it because no one ever tells them about it. Hey, keep that connection to the body. Did any of your parents ever tell you that? Keep that connection to the body? Did your doctor ever tell you that? Because they know nothing about it. But that was the Buddha's specialty. Because he was a mind scientist. So anyway, I don't want to belabor the point, but we've lost that connection also to natural wisdom. So this body was created in 9 months because of this natural wisdom. It knows how to heal itself, with all the different interrelated systems of digestion, metabolism, the immune system, early warning detections. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of intelligence. But yet, because of this conditioning and losing that connection with the body, we become insensitive to it. And we've lost that happiness of the present moment. Now, let's come back for a few moments and just want to ask you. So I know many of you have been meditating for long periods of time, or even today, I don't know, maybe for a few minutes or so, or in other meditations. I'm sure most of you had an experience where you had good concentration and you weren't thinking too much of the past or the future, but yet the mind was quite content. Where you got to a point where all the wandering thoughts subsided and you feel some pleasurable feeling and you wished, I wish I could stay here forever. Anybody ever have a thought in their mind like that? No? I'm sorry. Anyway, but you will, hopefully. So that's proof. When you get these experiences where all the neurotic thoughts stop and you gain some concentration and you're able to count the breaths from 1 to 10 without the mind getting lost, or you're no longer reacting to pains and so on. There'll be this sense of just total contentment, despite what's going on around you. There could be loud sounds going on, but the mind is no longer reacting to any of that. And that's because of the concentration, because through that you've allowed the mind to get reconnected to the present moment, and it's no longer reacting to things going on. And that's what's called the inner happiness. So anyway, but most people have lost that connection with it, and they don't know how to get it, because no one really has ever told them about it, except people in Buddhist countries that know about meditation, but even then, not many really know about it. So anyway, coming back to this example of the losing that natural intelligence. So let's say a typical example when you are young. I always use my own example. When I started, smoking cigarettes. So, you're hanging out with the gang and, or your friends, and one of them, stole a cigarette from their parents, and, hey, you gotta try this cigarette, man. Or your friends are starting to smoke and you want to be part of the group, right? You say, come on, try a cigarette. So maybe you take an innocent toke, and maybe you didn't like it, but your friends keep on egging you on. Come on, you got to be a man to smoke. That's what they used to say, right? In the commercials. Excuse me if I don't want to tread on anybody's toes. I know this woke environment nowadays. You have to watch what you're saying, but so anyway, so people get addicted to things. Not only cigarettes, but anything else. Junk food. What kind of music that's destroying your eardrums, all kinds of things. And then I said, but let's come with the smoking. So After smoking for a few months, all of a sudden you start. So what's the body telling you? Huh? That's not good for you, right? That's where the body telling us something is not good. But the mind, you go to light up a cigarette and the body's trying to unconsciously say, don't do that, don't do that. The mind says, shut up. Right? So our mind is actually doing things that harm our body. Because we've lost that connection to the body. And we're no longer sensitive to its needs. So we eat junk food and we're not aware of it, and we're not aware of the pains and the other things that might be happening to our teeth or our body or so many other things. Breathing the polluted air. Of course, many of the things we don't have a lot of control over, because of the pollution everywhere, and air and the water and food, and but still, we've lost that kind of sensitivity, and we have to now substitute external forms of pleasure because we've lost the natural connection to pleasure of the present moment, which comes to being connected to the subtler vibrations, in the body, in the present moment. Now we're having to, bring happiness from outside substances into us. Because the mind is always searching for some level of happiness. That's the basic instinct of the mind, is wanting to be happy and free from suffering. But yet, because of this conditioning, in the mind's desire for happiness, it's doing things that causes us unhappiness and suffering, especially in the terms of, these bad habits that we pick up. The babies learn bad speech from their parents or their neighbors or the school, or now it's the internet. You're learning how to tell lies and deceiving people, and they see all these politicians, rich people deceiving people and other things, and everyone starts doing it. They think it's natural, but then we get into all kind of problems because of that. And it's because we've lost that natural happiness that now we're substituting for get happiness from tasting certain types of food, other things. But all those things are also beyond our control, and they cause their own problems. So this is really kind of like what what the Buddha called the big picture of the human condition, and how it's bound up with problems and fear and worry and anxiety, and even the fear of death, because we don't know what is, we don't even know how we were born, so we don't know how our mind was born, we don't know how we're going to die. So the whole of the Buddha's teaching, really, this formulation of the Four Noble Truths, and especially the practice of meditation, is about how to start kind of reversing that process. It's not irreversible, but it is, unless a person learns the right way to reverse the process. And that is through the practice of meditation. Learning how to slow down the mind in its rampant grasping and craving and desire and all the habits, reactions of the world. And how to sort of program the mind and the nervous system to be able to regain that connection to the present moment. And it's always there. Because the present moment is always there. As I mentioned, it's literally just beneath your nose. Just right here, 150 or more pounds of flesh and bones, billions of cells. All you have to do is just remember, sitting, breathing in, sitting, breathing out, sitting. Why is that so difficult? It should be the most naturalist thing in the world. Because we've allowed the mind, we've made it difficult through not understanding the truth and believing what other people have said who don't really know the truth. But somebody like the Buddha comes along and, starts talking about that and gets people to think, the alternatives. So anyway, that's why, in the practice of the Buddhist teaching about this, and how to reverse that process of creating suffering to one of what is called disentangling the mind. Actually, there's one of the important books in the Theravada Buddhism is called the Visuddhimagga, and it's an explanation of the whole of the Buddhist teaching. But it starts with a little jingle. You know what a jingle is? Little saying, Anyway, so this person comes to the Buddha and tells the Buddha, the inner tangle in the outer tangle. This world has become entangled in a tangle. Now I ask Master Gotama, who succeeds in disentangling this tangle? And then the Buddha's reply was, when a person is grounded on the solid foundation of skillful conduct, and that means observing the precepts, moral behavior, but skillful conduct, living according to the laws of nature, in harmony with the laws of nature, the law of gravity, the law of karma, and then develops consciousness and wisdom, or develops mindfulness and wisdom, that person succeeds in disentangling this tangle. And the whole of the Buddhist teaching is based on pretty much that. And what is the outer tangle? Anybody have an idea what is the outer tangle? Yeah, basically the outer world, what you see, hear, taste, smell, touch. Because everybody's tangled in it. We have our likes and dislikes. Everything that you hear, what you see, smell, taste, feel on the body. There's some pleasant sensations that you feel, and then there's many painful ones you have. Anyway, so the inner tangle is the reaction to those. That means our mind has become all entangled. How many people have a kitty cat at home? And you ever had a ball of string where the cat knocks the string all over the room and it becomes all tied up in knots? Or some of you, if you have long hair, when I was young, I was 22 years old, and I rode a motorcycle in California with no helmet on and hair down to my shoulders, and it was blowing all over. And when I got back, it was just a horrible tangled mess. took a long time to disentangle it. Well, that's what happened to our mind when it's blown about by the winds of karma, and it gets all entangled with greed and hatred, love and hate, between the 84 million different types of objects out there in the world. Because we've allowed it to, because we've just only listened to other people, and we've never questioned the nature of truth. We never question, what is this mind? How does it operate? How does it tick? How does this sense of self come about? Did your parents ever ask you those questions? Or even the priests in church? Politicians? No. Why? I mean, you'd think, right? I mean, everybody wants to be happy, right? Then why is the world in such a mess and suffering? Just think about it. And that's why the Buddha said the cause of suffering is ignorance. That means not knowing the truth about the mind. And so what you believe is the way that you're going to think. The way you think is the way you're going to act and live in the world and create your karma. So the Buddha wanted us to, to really discover. So meditation is really a scientific. You should see meditation as a scientific undertaking. And this body is the laboratory. And the mind is the microscope. And by developing concentration, that's how you gain the higher powers of a microscope. Go from a power of 10 to a power of 50 to 100, 500. Then finally a power of an electron microscope where you smash the atom when you attain the 4th jhana or more. So anyway, that's the attitude that we should have when we're coming to meditation. Just sit down and be like a scientist. And looking down through focused awareness, where you focus on the breathing, that's like, focusing that microscope on the sensations of breathing. And as you gain concentration, it means as the mind stops its neurotic thoughts and you overcome sleepiness, the mind becomes concentrated and very clear. Then it's all the subtle details of everything, they become clear, like looking down through that microscope with a 500 power magnification. But of course, it all takes time. But I just wanted to, try to at least to explain that, and so this process that we're doing is developing the power of the mind to really see how the body and mind operates. And so during this retreat, basically, we will be going through what are called the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And the first one is attention to the breathing and the body, called mindfulness of the body. Because, again, the body is our connection to the present moment. And the body is considered the gateway to the mind. Because the source of all of our thoughts and consciousness basically is, being produced within the mind. And so, first you have to be centered and grounded in the body so that we can actually start directly observing the mind and thoughts. Because you can't just start directly observing your mind. It's like doctors in the middle, before microscopes, were developed. Somebody gets sick and they just have some idea maybe what was wrong, but they couldn't see under the skin, right? They might have done some good and so on, but still, and so then they had to cut open the body, and then they look in and they say, oh, well, look at all these different things. And observing. But The Buddha could do that without cutting open the body. Anyway, so developing concentration and focusing that attention. First you find the posture. The breathing helps you to get to the body, and then you feel the posture. And then as you keep remembering sitting, breathing, sitting, breathing, sitting, breathing, you'll start feeling subtler sensations underneath. Maybe you might feel the heartbeat. You might feel the pulse of blood or tingling sensations in the fingers. And if you do yoga and deep breathing, that enhances that. And so little by little, you start to feel the whole body start, becoming a mass of sensation. So that means now your attention is under the skin, and you've turned up the power of that microscope to at least 200 or 300. Even when you just start feeling subtle sensations, that means you've already developed a deeper level of awareness. So anyway, these are all things we're going to continue to kind of talk about. I don't want to talk too much now. But so I'm going to bring this talk to an end now. And if any of you have any questions about anything that we've been talking about, or coming from your meditation today, and during the tea break in the evening, then you can write those questions down, and then I'll try to answer them, after when we start the evening program. Okay? Now, does anybody have an urgent question that they might forget that they want to ask based on something I just mentioned in this talk? The question might have come up, but then, after an hour or two, you might, what was it? What was that question? Forget it. Okay, so now we're going to mindfully stand up to relieve any buildup of discomfort in your body, your legs, and do some standing and maybe a short walking meditation before sitting down again. So just mindfully stand up, don't rush. After standing up straight, take a few deep, slow breaths. Let the mind rush to the future. After breathing in, to hold the air in your lungs as long as you comfortably can, 4 or 5 seconds. Squeeze all that air out of the lungs into the bloodstream. And slowly breathe out and feel the last bit of air go out of the lungs. Just ride that contracting out breath down to the end. Cultivating this mindfulness. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, standing here and now. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, standing here and now. need to use the restroom, and go ahead and mindfully do that and then come back. Otherwise, just continue with standing for a few more minutes. Now I'm going to do some walking awareness around the room as we did this morning. So just move the cushions toward the center a little bit. Yapa, can you move those cushions a little bit? Both. No, the other way. So spread out around the cushions as we did this morning. Come back. Let's do some standing meditation, standing awareness for a while. You know, just want to mention something about the walking. The walking and the movement. So this morning I suggested being aware of, being aware of the foot lifting off the ground and swinging forward. Now, how many people felt a little bit wobbly doing that? With that? It takes a little time to do that, but more specifically, if you can make a brief little pause after the lifting, to pause just a brief second, like what when you're breathing, at the end of the in-breath and out-breath, you notice a little pause. Before the swinging forward move, and then pausing before lowering the heel to touch the floor. Then pausing before the toes get pressed down to the floor. And a pause before shifting forward. I'm just going to demonstrate it. You can kind of try to see that. So it's the in-breath, lifting, swinging, lowering, pressing, shifting forward. So each of those has a beginning and an end. And this is a beginning how to tune into impermanence. So all those movements have a beginning and an end, a short duration and an end. And then something else is followed by something else real quick, something else. And normally we don't see the beginning and end because we're rushing too fast. But when you slow down, then you're sort of forcing the mind to, forcing that up, to see the pause. Because you'll see the desire to shift forward. So just try to work on seeing if you can do that, if your balance is good enough. Because usually we just, people walk and they just go like that. That's enough. Lifting, swinging, it's a little bit unstable, pressing toes, and shifting forward. So all a consecutive process. And then the other foot is the same way. And then even while you're walking, and when you come to the stop at the corner, and you come to stopping, the reason why we have you pause is to force up the desire to turn. This is the way you directly observe the mind. If you have trouble seeing that thoughts arise in meditation because you don't have that concentration to detect the thought. But this is a specific training, one of the only ways, very powerful, the only way to actually force yourself to notice the beginning of the thought by delaying the reaction. So, you lift the foot up, and if you don't have that thought to move forward, it's not going to move. So you want to move forward. So then you'll see that urge to move forward. And you see that urge to lower the foot. You see that urge to press the toes to the floor. See the urge to shift forward. Because the mind's not going to do it by itself. And so that's sort of the trick, one of the tricks or the special process involved, especially in the body movement, where you're slowing down the movement so that you can actually see how body and mind are directly connected. And that develops a very powerful form of present moment teaching. You focus on that and you can't really think about anything else because it draws your attention to that. So anyway, just try to pay attention to that when you're doing that. Or anything that else happens to come. Even while you're doing the walking, you might get a very strong itch or a stinging sensation or some pain somewhere else on the body, and the body's still walking, but you can still notice that, and you can see the mind, urge to want to scratch or do something, but just keep walking. You realize that all these things they come and go. And, none of them are life-threatening. So anyway, 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and start the session. Go ahead and begin. In breath, lifting, swinging, out breath, lowering, pressing, shifting forward. In breath, lifting, swinging, out breath, pressing, shifting forward. When you're walking, try to touch your heel to the ground first, not your toes. It's kind of going backwards. You touch your toes first, and then you touch your heel first. Feel that forward momentum